Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games and giant thunder lizards. Solosaurus is sponsored by Game Castle, where the games are great and the memories are even better. Visit them at shop.gamecastle.com, that's castle with a K, and enter Solosaurus10 for 10% off your order, or click the link in the description. And now, here's your host, stomping through the underbrush, Michael Eckenfels.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Solosaurus podcast. I'm Michael Eckenfels, your host. Welcome to episode 91. And in this episode, we are going to talk about, or I will be talking about, and I guess you'll do a lot of listening, the game The Hunters, German U-Boats at War, 1939 to 1943. This is specifically the second edition of this game. I believe the first edition came out by Consim Press in 2013. Then it was published by GMT in 2014, and then the second edition, which just had a few errata to the rule book and a couple of extra counters added in there. Nothing earth-shattering or changing that would affect the game greatly, I don't think, in 2019. So this is actually a game that's near and dear to my heart right at the moment because, well, it's always been. I actually enjoy this game quite a bit, and I'm talking to you about it because I have other games actually on my radar at the moment, things that have been sent to me for review, but I haven't gotten far enough into them to feel comfortable enough with recording an episode to discuss them in detail. So I thought, why not use this game? Because I am actually using this as my first quote-unquote season for the Roll of Thunder podcast, which is going to be my narrative playthrough podcast once I get that off the ground finally. I have maybe an episode or two more that I want to do for that, and then it'll be going live. And I think that'll probably be by the end of the month or the beginning of November 2023 at the latest, just for timing's sake. And I want to make sure I make a little more or cover a little more ground here with Solosaurus and some of the great games that I've been receiving from our sponsors, as well as from developers and designers and publishers all over. So thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. And let's get into some news first. The Solo game and Solosaurus news, or Solo squared. I don't know if that's going to stick. It sounds kind of funny. When I say it looks great on paper, like it looks great on my outline, but as I say it out loud, I'm like, that sounds really nerdy. But maybe you guys love that. I don't know. I'm definitely a nerd, so hey, let's go for it. Let's keep it for now until something better comes up. So the first thing I want to talk about is the big thing, the big one, the big bit of information, and it's something that I actually announced last week on the Solosaurus Facebook page. We have a new sponsor. We have a awesome new sponsor. It is the Game Castle, and that's Castle with a K. If you've heard of them, then great. If not, well, hey, let me enlighten you. They are a good bunch of folks. They have 10 retail stores around the country, the United States. It's pretty incredible, actually. I've more I learned about them, the more I liked it, because there really aren't that many chain stores anymore. I think Gaming Goat is one. There's probably, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with this kind of thing as I should be, but I was impressed, very impressed that there's 10 stores. And when I was doing my research on this before I contacted them, I just thought this sounds like a really good company to partner with. And I reached out to them, and we have everything signed, and we're good to go. So there is a link in the description. You would be doing me a great favor, and them as well, if you would click on it. Check them out and see what you think, because I've negotiated. Well, actually, I actually asked, and they said sure, at getting a discount for you guys. So you will get a 10% discount off of your purchases from the Game Castle, not off of pre-orders, because those are already discounted 20%, but 10% is pretty good, especially if you're a huge game buyer like I used to be last year. I don't do this anymore. I actually bought my first game in a long time just now. I took advantage of the Prime Deal days. I've been kind of going back and forth. Do I want to do it or not? And I purchased Warriors of Krim, the board game. This was a Prime Deal day that was just too good to be passed over. I mean, it was like a 41% discount on the game from the normal price. So I went for it. But I digress. I'm talking about Game Castle and your 10% discount. So What you can do is click on the link in the description, and that will take you right there, and it should already have it loaded up for you discount-wise. If you prefer, you can just visit the site from anywhere you want and then plug in the code Solosaurus10. That's all one phrase, no spaces, dashes, anything like that. Solosaurus10. That will get you a 10% discount. Now, full disclosure, I actually do get a small commission from all of your purchases, and that would go exclusively to taking care of costs of this podcast. So another bit of news, nothing major. I went ahead and took over the payments from Martin. I can't thank him enough for keeping these lights on for over a year for no content, and it's just pretty amazing that he did that. And I thought, well, why do that? I'll just go ahead and take it over because I'm going to be moving this forward, and thanks to him, we're still going. And as well as for the last 2 months too, he's been paying for that. So, but I took it over. It's all me now. Lucky you, I guess. We're going to be doing this together. So hopefully you're going to like what I'm doing here in the future. And I hope that you like the Game Castle. If you check them out, I'd appreciate that. Click on the link, or again, Solosaurus10 discount code at checkout. There's going to be some other supporters of the channel as well. There's a local board game store called Meeples and Beyond. There's just a single store. They are very good folks. I've bought a lot of games there in the past. I am going to be getting a game from them every so often. Actually, I picked one up already for future review. I will be mentioning them in more detail when the time comes for that, but I want to give a shout out to them. I will, of course, be providing contact info for them when the time comes and I'm reviewing that particular game, which should be in the next 2 or 3 episodes or so. So that's that. Podcast sponsors are on board. We are moving forward. It's great. Good time to have a Solosaurus podcast. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly are guest hosts. So me doing this by myself, I don't know if you guys like this or not. Just one person talking, one person reviewing. You're not getting a discussion except for me talking. I mean, obviously I haven't had that problem yet, and this is the 3rd episode I've been doing on my own, and it's just kind of flowing. So far so good, I would think. But I imagine you get pretty bored just listening to me all the time. So I have reached out to a few designers and a few other folks, other reviewers, other podcasters, to see if they're interested in coming on. And we're going to set up a few things, I think, in the near future. So look forward to that. I don't want to speak as to who exactly. I just know that I've gotten some yeses, and we'll see if we can coordinate some times to make that happen. So it'll be a nice little surprise for you when the time comes. So I'm looking forward to that a great deal, especially people who have perspective specifically on solo gaming. We've done that before in the past, of course. Martin and I have done that. I'm pretty sure Brendan and Carter have as well. And we're just going to keep it going. So you're going to get to listen to other voices besides mine once in a while. Lucky you. We're going to have a good time, I think. So the review structure also of the podcast is going to be pretty much the same. I'm not going to really change anything. I might add a little bit here and there, and I'm probably going to go off the rails too, especially when I'm just discussing things myself. I am doing a script, but it's not a verbatim one. It's just kind of a bullet point list. Cover this, cover that, cover the other. And for particularly complex games, I imagine I would be having some really detailed stuff in there, but it's going to be pretty much the same. We're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, I keep saying we. I'm so used to doing the we thing. So overall presentation, components, rules, composition, gameplay, solo strength, and replayability. Now, some of these things will probably kind of blend together, I imagine. Some of them are going to be mentioned earlier, some will be later. It just depends on how the flow goes. But these are the things that I want to hit on with every game that I look at. If all 6 are excellent, and I'm not talking about a rating system, I'm not talking about like poor, mid, I can't believe I just said mid, sorry about that. I'm not going to say bussin', I promise. Poor, average, good, excellent. I'm not talking about ratings like that, or percentages or numbers, or 9 out of 10 or anything like that. I'm not a huge fan of top 5, top 10 kind of stuff, but I'll probably do it once in a while. In fact, there's one guest podcaster that I will bring on who I think who wants to talk or do something like that, or suggested it, and I think that's a good idea just to do it once in a while. It's nothing wrong with that. But if these categories are all just wonderful and excellent, I think. I'm going to give it a stomp of approval. And I know that's big news. At least for those who have listened to the show in the past, you know that I have not given a stomp once. And it's not because I'm terribly analytic or anything like that. It's I need to be blown out of the water by a game in order for that to happen. And nothing I played really did that. That's not to say they're not good games. Donning the Purple, I believe, was one Martin and I reviewed several episodes back. He wanted to give it a stomp. I did not. And it doesn't mean I think it's a bad game at all. So just because something doesn't get a stomp doesn't mean it's not awesome. It's just, there's some little concerns here and there. I think it's going to be kind of a challenge for me, actually, to do that. But you might be surprised. You might not. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm going to keep the stomp of approval. Happy to give the artwork for box inclusion for them to include on their boxes for future publishing if they do so for future copies. But yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to move forward with the stomp of approval, which I think is a cool little thing. It'd be nice to be able to assign it once in a while. Now let's go to solo gaming news. No more Solosaurus news that I can think of, unless something pops into my mind later. We're going to talk about solo gaming news, and we're going to get that exclusively from Solitaire Times, solo board gaming news. That's solitairetimes.net. I actually reached out to them and sent them an email just as an FYI. Hey, just want to let you know I'm the host of Solosaurus, and we read your... There we go again. Sorry. Well, I guess you're with me here, right? So you're listening. So if I keep doing that, then think of it that way. We are getting all of our news from you guys. I hope you don't mind. Very, trying to drive traffic to your site. I think that's excellent that they're continuing to do this. So let's get going on that. I've looked at this a little bit, so some of it is not. I haven't. I'm going to look through Watch Your Back week of October 1st to the 7th. I think I might. No, I have not covered this. So this is 99 Ninja, a 1 to 2 player abstract strategy game in which you place semi-transparent cards on a grid, trying to cover samurai images and empty spaces with polyomino. Okay. POLYOMINO. Again, my pronunciation troubles continue, but hey, the P word. There we go. Shapes. The P word shapes. The cards can be flipped and rotated so that you only cover samurais and empty squares and not ninjas or daimyo. The game also comes with solo rules. It is launching on Kickstarter on October 2nd. So I'm recording this October 12th. This is out there, 99 Ninja, if that sounds interesting. Not enough ninja games in the world, I don't think. That's my own personal opinion. There should be plenty more. I think we need more ninja movies, too. The 80s was a great time for ninja movies. We do not have any anymore. We need more. We must have ninja movies. Okay. Next, I'm going to look at their article, freshly added to BGG, October 5th, 2023. Let's see. So the first thing that comes to my attention, I'm just kind of scrolling through. I'm not going to mention all of these, but the writer for this article says, next we have another board game set in the Nova Aetas, AETAS world, which is, I think, comprised of Black Rose Wars, Dungeonology, and Nova Aetas. It's called Requiem, Downfall of Magic. The author continues by saying, in a slightly twisted 16th century Europe, a death cult surfaces amidst an uneasy peace between Catholics and Protestants, and the Pope sends a secret squad to deal with it. Then you have the usual package narrative campaign with branching choices, minis, dice rolling, asymmetric characters, etc. to be kickstarted. So it has not come out yet. I personally love these kinds of games. Narrative campaigns, branching choices, miniatures, dice rolling, asymmetric characters. That's great. I mean, part of the fun of these kinds of games is figuring out what combos work for you. I love doing the research on them too, such as, going to Board Game Geek and searching for articles on a particular game that says, how many characters would you play solo for this game? Like Shadows of Brimstone, for instance, or or Etherfields, or Sheol, Sheol. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but you get the idea. It's cool to me. If the story is well written, if it's done well, then why not keep making more of them? And they are. I mean, they're coming out in droves, so it's obviously a good system. They're huge, though. The problem is I have so many of these types of games, and they're so big, and they have so much content that they're so hard to get to. They're hard to get through. They're hard to learn. While I've spoken on previous episodes about being more into easy to set up and play games, I still have a passion for these, and I'm still looking forward to a lot of them. I have Secrets of the Lost Station is one big one. ISS Vanguard, I have the all-in for that, but I opted to wait for Wave 2, which will be this quarter sometime, but I'm guessing it might be next quarter 1 of 2024, I'm guessing. That's fine. I'd rather it be perfect than have something rushed and get it through it, So what else do I have? Frostpunk, all in. Skyrim, the adventure game, all in. It's just on and on I can go. I love big box games. Oh, Gloomhaven, of course. Frosthaven, of course. Again, the list goes on, and it's stuff that I would love to get to the table, but it's like, if I really want to do that, I have to go on a game hiatus, probably episode hiatus for a few weeks, just to make sure I can process the game properly. It doesn't mean that I need to stop recording, but, for me, if I get a game like that on the table, I want to continue playing it, right? I want to see where the branches go. I want to get deep into it and even get past the point where I am comfortable with presenting it to you and my thoughts on it. I want to see it through to the end, and we're talking like 100 hours of gameplay for Gloomhaven, I think. So that would be a tremendous accomplishment to get that done within a couple of weeks. Next, I am seeing this is what the author is saying. Before coming back to more concrete matters, let's make a detour through science fiction. Okay, that's a little weird. Beside concatenating. I think they meant concentrating. Concentrating too many words together. Wait a second. Let me look that up. Nope, that is a word. Okay. I'd like to think I'm a technical writer and I'm well versed and I'm learning new things every day, and that's pretty awesome. Concatenate. That is a word that means link things together in a chain or a series. Okay, cool. Well, there you go. So welcome aboard to our learning train today, ladies and gentlemen. You've learned a new word, concatenating. That's awesome. Okay, I digress, but I think that's awesome. I love learning new things like that. So besides concatenating too many words together, Horizon Forbidden West Seeds of Rebellion is a cooperative campaign game with a deck building and dice rolling set in the universe of the video game Horizon Forbidden West, published by Steamforged Games. So except EXCEPT, I think they mean expect a bunch of minis. Launches Kickstarter on November 21st. There's one more I want to talk about. It's kind of cool looking. I don't know a lot about it. I can just see the image here and also the paragraph that the author writes, which is, finally, the serious stuff, starting with Umbrella, an impactful theme in our everyday life. Actually, the game is set in the streets of New York, and from above, the umbrellas just look like small colored beads. It's therefore up to you to slide rows of people to create specific patterns. It sounds interesting. I mean, looking at the picture, it looks like you're looking down on a crosswalk, and it's a gray, washed out kind of crosswalk with white stripes, and then these colorful beads, red, yellow, blue, green. It sounds like a little puzzly type of game. If that sounds like something appealing to you, then please go check it out. I like it just from the juxtaposition of the coloring, from the gray bottom to the colorful little beads that look like umbrellas from high up, from maybe 20 stories up. That's kind of cool. From the image as well, it looks like it's 1 to 4 players, 30 minutes playtime. So that sounds cool. So I might be checking that one out. And now my review of The Hunters, German U-Boats at War, 1939 to 1943. So again, I chose this because I didn't want to wait a couple more weeks to get you an episode. I am still trying to learn a few games that I've been sent for review, and I've not been overwhelmed. It's just been a lot to learn, and I've been making time and carving it out to make sure that I can do this. So I'm not going to go by the wayside. If I find something challenging to get into, I might go with something else so I can get an episode out so you have something to check out, just to show that we're not going on a hiatus again. If I do, I'm going to be making announcements like crazy on Facebook and to let you know. But let's look at the Hunters now. So this is a solo war game. Let me read one of the intro paragraphs here. The Hunters, German U-Boats at War, 1939 to 1943, is a solitaire tactical level game placing you in command of a German U-boat during World War II. Your mission is to destroy as much Allied shipping and as many capital ships as possible while advancing your crew quality and increasing your commander rank, culminating in a special decoration, all while remembering you have to make it home amidst diminishing odds of survival as the war progresses. Truer words cannot be spoken. So this game, I enjoy it greatly because, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but I enjoy it greatly because it's so approachable. It's so easy to get into, especially if you start early in the war in September of 1939. It gets more difficult as time goes on because as a German U-boat, of course, you have Allied ships hunting you, but early in the war, their anti-submarine techniques were not very polished. They didn't have great equipment, so they weren't very good at it. Not to say the Germans didn't lose U-boats, they did, but in this particular case, in the game's case, I should say, it's kind of a learning curve. So it kind of takes it easy on you at first. And as we get later in the game, you're going to learn really quick that what you were able to do in late 1939, early 1940 is not going to be easy to do in late 42, early 1943. As the paragraph said, your objective is to sink as many enemy ships as possible, and that is recorded in the form of tons. So each ship is rated by size by tonnage. So a battleship, say, can be about 35,000 tons, depending on the battleship. Transports like freighters could be 2,000 to 12,000 or more, maybe tons or less even. Tankers are usually around 8 to 10,000. Again, that could vary greatly. I'm just kind of giving you a general idea. If you sink a ship, you get to score its tonnage in your patrol log. So the idea, of course, is to rack that up and get as many as you can before the game ends or before your ship is sunk. Submarine. Sorry, I keep saying ship. I mean sub or boat. Hope people out there who know submarines well are not going to judge me accordingly when I slip like that. And I probably will or already have, actually. So the game is a lot of fun, easy to get into, but let me discuss it a little bit more so you can see for yourself. So the game comes with quite a bit of content. There's 220 counters or playing pieces on one die cut sheet included with the game. They actually expanded the counter mix with additional spare counters for this second printing version. So again, second printing version, not second edition. I'm sorry, I said second edition earlier. I didn't mean that. Second printing. They also added a new marker to track surfaced or submerged status of a U-boat and a couple of extra markers as well, just in case you happen to lose one. So, that's the danger of having just one marker for a certain important information, and then if you lose it, then you're having to figure out something else. Besides that, there is a U-boat combat mat, which is used to approach and attack ships that you're going after. There's a U-boat display mat, of which there are 8 total types of U-boats, but there's 4 U-boat sheets. They're double-sided, so you have a U-boat type on each side. Why does that matter? Well, different U-boat types or classes will have different capabilities. So some are small, some are large, some will be able to take a lot of damage, some are having a lot of torpedoes, some have a lot of torpedo tubes in the front, some have a few in the back, some have none in the back. It just depends. And when you decide to start your campaign, we'll decide which U-boats you can choose from. So if you choose to start in September of 1939, when the war kicks off, you have your choice of 3 different types of U-boats. You can decide to start at a later date, April of 40, to get a different type, October of 1940, different type, etc., if you choose to start the game at that late stage. But the thing is about that is you're denying yourself a chance to really rack up your score if you don't start in September. I mean, that could actually be a challenge in and of itself, say, if you wanted to start in the latest time, which is May of 1943. But that is a particular type of U-boat that is called the Type 7C Flak, which I believe was a U-boat that was loaded with anti-aircraft weapons. Aircraft attacks became a real problem the longer the war went, because they had radar that they could use, and the ships did too, to find even periscopes sticking up out of the water. And that was a really good way for them to catch U-boats. So that's a potential choice there, but it's not something that really appeals to me. But there's plenty of different types of U-boats to appeal to different people. So you get all kinds of choices here. The components in general are really good. And I say in general because we're talking little counters that are half-inch in size, but they're well designed because you can tell at a glance what they are, and that's very important. Somebody like me, I really love iconography. I really love coloring and juxtaposition of those colors to really make something stand out, especially on a mat. I love the design of the actual U-boat mats as well. And there's even a map sheet that you can use if you want to use that to move your U-boat around. I will talk about that in a little bit as to how that works. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole right now, but the components overall I think are excellent. They're really good for this type of game. The rules book is pretty good. I wouldn't say excellent, but it's funny because I know Greg Smith, the designer of this game, has taken flack from other games not having really good rule books. And I believe Night Fighter Ace and Interceptor Ace fall into that category. But he's a really humble person. He says, he admits, rulebook writing is not my number one strength. So I totally understand. But he takes all feedback to heart, and they've incorporated those changes in future versions. So it's interesting to say that this particular one, though, I never had a problem with it. It's interesting because it goes into the components of the game. It talks about the overall game flow and how it works, just as kind of a summary. And then it goes into the game setup, which shows you exactly how to set up counters, what to pay attention to, and then it goes into the sequence of play. So it starts step by step how you go through each part of the patrol, how to complete the patrol, and then refit as well, which is a word for the time it takes between patrols to fix the boat up. So if there's damage, to repair it. Even if there's no damage, you still have to reprovision it. You have to clean it out. You have to, do some various maintenance tasks to bring it back up to full strength and make it ready for the next mission. And repairs of damage, that really eats into it. It can cause more time. But again, I'll talk about that in a little bit here. But otherwise, the rule, goes into combat, talks about how combat works, how to set that up. And this is something for a new wargamer, solo wargamer especially, it's probably going to look a little confusing, but really, there's pages of this that talks about combat. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4 different encounters, things like that. It might seem daunting, but it's really not. I mean, like with anything that's interesting, if you dive in, if you try to learn it, if you try to process it, you'll be able to get it. And the way it was with me was that way. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to keep track of, but it's not. And within a patrol or two of my first game, I was able to just do it without having to refer to the rules. I mean, I still did occasionally, but it is a good way of, it presents the information well, it's clear, it's organized well, and I think it's a good rule book overall. With gameplay, as I said, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. It's easy to comprehend. So you've got a submarine. Your job is to go out and sink Allied ships. You want to sink freighters and tankers, but you really want to sink capital ships, which are big battleships, aircraft carriers, heavy cruisers, things like that. Lots and lots of tons, but they're very difficult to sink because they are so strong. And they also have escorts too. Escorts is a word for destroyers, light or other light type combat ships whose job it was to protect larger ships or merchant ships from submarines like you. So again, they get better at their job as time goes by. So you kind of learn really quick what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. And then even so, luck can really throttle you here. Now, a word about that. Now that I've mentioned luck, let's talk about that because we're kind of going into gameplay now. This is a die rolling fest. And I know a lot of you probably do not like that. You don't like randomness. You don't like that. You want to be able to make meaningful decisions. And maybe you've heard of this game or games like this where you're rolling on charts constantly and tables. Yes, you are. But I would not present this unless I thought it would appeal to some of you, because I think there's a lot of points in this game where you are able to make important decisions, make meaningful decisions that impact how the game flows. And I know that's important for a lot of folks. I mean, it's important to me, but in some cases, I'm happy to let the game take control and ride it like a roller coaster. This is kind of like that, but you do have points where you have to make solid choices, or at least hope that you're making solid choices. So you're rolling on tables everywhere. You're rolling all the time, but the way it flows, though, it's natural. At least it is to me, and it makes it come across like a story. It makes it come across like a narrative, and that's why I'm using this for the Roll of Thunder podcast, or the first season of that, because I think it would be great use for that. I think it'd be awesome for that, and it kind of is. I like how it's coming out so far. It's still a work in progress, but it builds this story in your mind, like if you're reading a book, kind of a thing. And while the game visually is pretty good, it's not overwhelmingly awesome or anything. It's good, though, for what it does. Again, this narrative that builds in your head, that your imagination fuels, is really where the game has a great advantage. And I love that about it. So you first are determining your war patrol every month. So you start off, like I said, if you start in September 1939, you roll on a table for that particular time frame, which I think runs from September through December. That one table, you roll on there, and it tells you where you go. Sometimes usually it's the British Isles that early, because you got to think in terms of World War II. Now, I should mention, you're not changing history here at all. You're along for the ride as a U-boat commander. The war is going to progress as it progressed historically. You have no impact on that, although you can sink ships that were never sunk, such as battleships and carriers or other ships as well. You have that ability, so you kind of do change it a little bit, but overall you're not making any difference in history overall. So that's important, I think, to mention to some folks. It's not alternate history, except in the frame of you're making your own history, but the war, it's an elephant. You can't stop it. It's going to do what it's going to do. So, and depending on the time frame, as I said, that you are within, will determine the possibilities that you have for a war patrol. So that means after May of 1940, historically, Germany conquered France and the Low Countries, as well as had Denmark and Norway under their control. This will open up more opportunities in later tables for later dates for you to find other places to go to. And this will impact the ships that you can encounter, and will also increase the danger greatly too. So you start off, like I said, determine your war patrol. Early on, it's going to be the British Isles, almost always. There might be a mine-laying mission in there too, which I think is terminally boring, but it is part of what U-boats did. They would go sneak into a harbor, lay mines by releasing them out of the torpedo tubes, and scurry away without being noticed. So they would hope that, any Allied ship would come through and hit the mine and sink, and that would be a victory of sorts. It's not the same as being able to stalk enemy ships and the whole process that this game puts you through. I don't do it hardly that often, though. A mine laying mission is very rare. There's also a mission type where you can drop off a spy. So you're transporting a spy. This spy is an extra part of your crew, but technically they can be hurt or even killed in combat if your U-boat is hit before you unload this guy. So that would fail your mission right there. But you are sneaking up to a particular spot and dropping him off and then going back home. And of course, the main meat and potatoes of the game, the most chance you have of the greatest chance patrol that you have of going on is a actual war patrol, actual combat patrol. So the way that works is once you determine that, you have a sheet, or you have actually tracks, I should say, on your U-boat mat, and each track corresponds with a certain geographical location. So British Isles, there's a track. Spanish coast, track. North America, track. You have that on your U-boat sheet, but there's also a map sheet, as I mentioned earlier, that has tracks as well, but they're laid out like a map. They follow this route to, say, if it's North America, follows this nice route to North America and then back again. Other games that are similar to this that Greg Smith has done, such as Beneath the Med or Silent Victory, do this exact same thing, and I kind of like that. It just depends on how much room you have on your desk for playing games. Depends on which aesthetic you like better. If you just don't want one more map or one more sheet on your desk, then you can just do without it. It's not necessary, but it adds a certain aesthetic to the game. And this track is made up of travel boxes. So you start on one end, and in each box you move into, you make a roll for an encounter. And if there's no encounter, you move to the next one and the next until you get to the end of patrol, at which point you return back to port, and then you refit and do end of patrol things, which I'll get into, and then move on to the next war patrol. But if you roll an encounter, the encounters can be several different types of things. So if you're just on a regular war patrol, or heck, even if you're doing a mine laying operation, or if you're doing a spy drop off, it's it's still possible to have these same encounters, and those are ship encounters or an aircraft attack. The aircraft attack is rare, but it becomes more possible as the war progresses, especially because the Allies, as I said, became better at hunting. They had better radar, and they were able to detect your periscope and your submarine much more easily. So that is a thing that can happen often later in the war. Early on, not so much, fortunately, because it's very dangerous. The ships, though, that's again, I say meat and potatoes for combat patrol. This is actually the heart of the game, too. It's meeting ships and sinking them. That's your real objective, and that's what you want to do. You can encounter a wide variety of ships. Early on, you're probably going to meet one ship or two ships that are by themselves with no escort, which is absolutely ideal because you don't have to worry about getting counterattacked. You can attack at your leisure. You can get as close to them as you want before you fire your torpedoes. That's great because it gives you lots more options. But when you have an escort, you got to think more about how am I going to approach this and be safe, but still maximize my chance of hitting these ships. There's light freighters and large freighters, I should say. Small freighters and large freighters. Sorry. Small and large freighters. There's tankers as well, and then there's capital ships. Capital ships always have an escort. The two-ship encounter can sometimes have an escort. The one-ship encounter can sometimes have an escort. And then there's one more encounter type, which is a convoy, where you encounter 4 ships plus an escort. So part of the decision-making process, as I said, you really don't have many choices up to this point. You do have a couple here and there. I will get to that in a second, but nothing major or impactful on the game. Well, I shouldn't say that. Actually, one thing that I did not mention earlier, you can choose your starting rank. I like to choose the most bottom rank so I can advance the furthest, and I think there's 4. No, there's actually 5. There are 5 officer ranks, and starting at the lowest one does not give you any particular advantages, but higher ranks will give you slight advantages the further you get. So you can start with the second rank, I think, but you can start with the first rank, which is just something I like to do as a challenge for myself. So there's that. But I digressed slightly, and I've already lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. So anyway, let's get back to the types of ships. So, I'm sorry. One of the major decision points you have is that here, when you see what you've encountered, but you can still push a little bit more without having to really make a choice. You can probably choose at that point, I'm not even wanting to mess with this. I'm moving on. Let's move to the next travel box. And you can do that. But there's nothing harmful, I should say, in investigating further. And by that, you take the next step, which is rolling a die to see what kind of ships these are. So with the one ship or two ship or convoy, you roll to see if they're large freighters or small freighters or tankers. Small freighters are more common, large freighters less common, and tankers very rare. So that actually translates to a D6 roll. So a roll of 1 to 3 is a small freighter, 4 or 5 is a large freighter, a 6 is a tanker, I believe is how that works. And so you'll determine what these ships are made up of. So if you have a convoy, you have 4 ships, you need to roll for each of the 4 to see which type of ships they are. And then you get to roll on more tables to see which exact ships they are. And this is kind of one of the cool things about the game that I like so much is there's a large table with several, actually I think more than 100 ships that were historically sunk during World War II. So if you get 2 small freighters you encounter, you roll on the small freighter table. I think there's about 50 or so of them. You roll, you get a named ship and the exact tonnage that it is. So that gives you an even better idea of its value as a target. And you can even look it up actually online. There's a really good website called uboat.net if you're interested in learning more about the histories of these vessels. And I believe the ships that were sunk are in that database. So, if you're just curious, go check it out. But this will give you all the info you need to know to really decide if you want to encounter or if you want to attack these ships. Usually when you're first starting out, you're going to want to attack everything that moves early on. But the further your patrol goes, the further into the track you get, the more damage you take if you do take damage. And the less torpedoes you have, the more you're going to have to be thoughtful about, do I really want to take these guys on? There's an escort. Or if there's not, nothing's going to stop me. But even the ships that aren't escorted, there's a chance after you unleash your initial attack, if you don't sink the ship, there's a chance an escort will appear. So there's no 100% guarantee there, which adds to the tension quite a bit. It's kind of cool. And once you've ID'd the ships, you put markers onto the U-boat combat mat, and there's little columns that have numbers on them from 1 to 5, which correspond to the size of the ship and actually the damage points that it can take. Usually small freighters are 2 to 3. I think large freighters are 3 to 4, and then capital ships are always 5. So that's why they're the hardest to hit, or the hardest to sink, because they have so much damage they can take. And usually not sinking a ship in one round, it can be a very dangerous thing for you, especially if there's escorts around. On this table, you then make your next important decision, which is how many torpedoes do I want to fire, and from what end of the boat do I want to fire them. So some of these have the ability to fire from both ends if you want, but you have to take a penalty. I believe there's a modifier to that. There's actually things that can mitigate that later in the game if you are lucky enough to get to that point. Achievement, which is a decoration you can earn, and I'll get into that later when we get to the talking about the end of patrol sequence. It becomes really a challenge to sit there and decide what you're going to do. But it's one of my favorite aspects of the game in that I need to figure out, okay, who am I going to attack and what with? If I'm on a convoy with 4 ships and they're all lucrative targets, like say a tanker and 3 large freighters, it's like, oh man, which one's the biggest one? That's probably the one I'm going to want to attack because they're all the same damage points. I think 3 or 4. I think they're mostly 3 though. So you're going to probably want to prioritize that way. What's the most valuable target? That's the one I want to go after. And then what's the next valuable? That's the one I want to go after. But you have a limited number of torpedoes you can fire with on this one round of combat. So you're going to think, how am I going to allocate these? Do I throw 1 torpedo at each ship in a convoy? If it's only 1 ship, do I fire all 4 torpedoes to guarantee? Well, there's no guarantees actually, but it'll give me a better chance of sinking them. So these are the thought process you have to go through. And it really is meaningful because you're going to think later, oh man, I should have done this, or next time I'm going to do that. And it doesn't it puts the seed in your mind, but it's still something that doesn't always work out the way you want it to, which makes the game really fun in that regard, I think. Once you've allocated those torpedoes, or you can even do a surface attack too. If you want to attack in the surface, you can use your deck gun, which I never really bothered with that. I prefer the torpedo attack. You can even attack surfaced if you want, or submerged. You get to make that choice as well. And I believe you determine if it's going to be daytime or nighttime. And if it's daytime, you can wait for nightfall, which is better for you because you're less likely to be detected. But I think you can do it in the daytime. I can't remember. Shoot, if you can do it during the day. If it's just a single ship with no escort, maybe you want to just fire your deck gun in it and hope you get lucky. If it's just maybe a small freighter. So there's that. Those are other points where you can make a meaningful decision. But overall, most likely you're going to submerge at night and figure out how you're going to allocate your torpedoes. So for each torpedo, you need to roll to hit. And there's modifiers to that. Early on, there's not so many, but later in the war, there will be more. You roll. If you hit, you doesn't guarantee anything because these torpedoes can be duds. And that's the next thing you need to check with a roll. Duds were torpedoes that did not explode when they hit their target. And Germany had a lot of problems with torpedoes like this early on. The Americans had even worse problems with them. They had terrible torpedoes in the Pacific War. There's whole kinds of information out there on that if you want to read about it. It's really kind of scary to think of. They would go to war with torpedoes that don't work, but Germany did this too. And I want to say it's a 50-50 chance that the torpedo will not blow up when it hits something. So even if you hit, it doesn't mean it's going to explode. So you roll to hit, you roll for a dead, and if it does explode, then you roll again for damage points. So this is where your thought process pays off as to which torpedoes am I going to allocate where. Am I going to put 2 on this ship? Even putting 2 on a small freighter doesn't guarantee it's going to sink it, because you could roll 1 damage or no damage, or anywhere up to 4, I think it is, and that is the max. So you're not going to be able to sink, say, a capital ship with just 1 torpedo. You're going to need to allocate many to it. Again, the thought process that you're going to have to go through to figure out how you're going to do this. It's very challenging, and it's very interesting to me. I'm not a fan of math. Let's just say that I am not a fan of math at all, but this is simple math and I can wrap my head around it. So it's not a problem. So once they explode, you see if you sink the ship. If you do more damage points to it than it has in the space it's in, say it's in the 2 space. If you do 2 damage points or more, it's a goner. You write that down on your patrol sheet, including the number or the tons. Actually, you write that down originally when you encounter it, and you circle it on your patrol sheet if it's sunk. And so that way at the end of the patrol, if you survive and get to port, you can total up your numbers and have a final total. If you sink all the ships that you're going after, congratulations. That's a pretty good achievement, especially if there's more than one. If there's just one and it's by itself and you sink it, encounter's done. You move to the next space and you start this whole process over again. If, however, you hit a ship and damage it, and there's no escort, there's a chance, as I said, of an escort coming and appearing. If there is an escort, then it will come after you. You can still choose to try to stalk the target, especially if it's a convoy. You can say 4 ships, you might only want to concentrate on 2, and then you got lucky and sunk them both, and escort comes after you. But you're thinking, I feel lucky, punk. I want to stick with this, and I want to try to sink these other 2 as well. You can do that. But you have to survive the escort, which is kind of a challenge in and of itself. Now, early on, it's not so bad, but again, as the war progresses, they get much better at their jobs, and it becomes more of a challenge to decide, how far do I push this? Do I really want to continue this, or do I want to not? And so there's a detection roll that you have to make for this escort to see if it can find you. And you can make a choice here, actually, to affect that. Normally, you fire your torpedoes and you dive to try to get out of the way. But that's not something that's important to the game. That's just kind of how the U-boats operated. They'd fire and dive to try to avoid detection if they spotted destroyers in the area. The choice you can make here is whether or not you want to exceed your test depth. Now, all submarines are rated for a certain test depth, which is they're considered to be their maximum depth, but you can still go below that in an emergency to get a little bit of a modifier in your favor to avoid detection. What this does is it causes damage to your hull, though, and guarantees you're going to have to wait longer in port to refit to repair this. So if you're unscathed, doing that is probably not a great idea unless you're just not feeling lucky. It helps a little bit, like I said, with avoiding detection. But early on, again, this is not as much of a concern. It's kind of a silly thing to do actually early on, but later you're probably going to be doing it more and more as the game progresses, because that little modifier can mean the world of difference between getting hit or not. Because if that escort finds you, it's going to attack you. So you roll on another table to see how many hits it inflicts on you, and then you roll this number of times on a damage table to see where these hits are inflicted. It's kind of a cool process. I love it actually because it's like, what's going to happen now? Oh no, it got 3 hits, and you mark it on the U-boat patrol map, or U-boat combat mat rather, and you roll and you see where that hit is, and you roll and you see where the hit is, and you keep going until all the hits have been made. But it's not over yet at that point. You determine the damage, and sometimes this can mean having to abort your patrol, especially if it hits a vital system. Or if it hurts somebody that you can't continue the patrol with. You can always make this choice, and this is another one you can make at some point when you're out of the woods and free of any escorts attacking you, to decide to abandon the patrol and just go back to port. So that's always an option. But when you're in the middle of this combat with the escort, you don't get a chance to fire on it. I think the game says that U-boats rarely did, because destroyers were so small, 800 tons to 1,200 tons roughly. They weren't really lucrative or weren't worth a torpedo, and they were really darned hard to target, to get to line up on. Not to say it didn't happen, but it was just a rare enough thing that they just decided not to include that in the game. So at this point, you're just trying to avoid detection. And the thing is, if that escort detects you, it gets a bonus, because once it detects you, it attacks. You roll for all the damages. Then you have to roll for another detection, and it gets a bonus to try to detect you, because it already has. Does it keep you in its sights, or does it lose you somehow? That's one of the more tension things, because this can be a cascade. This can be a snowball. You can roll detect. It's detected me. It's detected me. It's detected me. Hit, 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 hit. And it can just be this domino effect that just really hurts you badly. Or you might get lucky and not even get detected at all. It just is kind of funny how that works. You can completely go under the radar, so to speak, and be missed, or you can suffer 4 or 5 attacks in a row early in the game even. It just depends on how great your luck is. And again, some of you might not like that, because die rolls, you don't like that. But this kind of thing happened in World War II. I mean, U-boats were unfortunate. They got caught by escorts occasionally, especially as the war progressed. As I said, it becomes more and more difficult. So this can be, well, I don't want to say it's fun. It's not really fun being trapped in a little pressurized tube at 300 feet and waiting for escort ship to depth charge you into oblivion. But it's tense in that regard. So you're just waiting to see what's going to happen. And when you finally are not detected by that escort, that's a moment of relief. Like, oh, wow. It's like this weight lifts up off your shoulders, and you're just, okay, wipe the sweat away. What's the damage? What has been done? If there's damage done to your ship, then you determine that. You have a chance of being able to repair these things at sea, at least some of them. Injured crewmen might be able to be healed. There's 3 different levels of damage to a crewman. There's light wound, which isn't a big deal, serious wound, which can be, and then death, of course, which takes them out of the picture entirely. If this happens to your character, your captain, then your career is over. And that's what this is all centered on, is you as the captain. You have named crewmen, though. You have an executive officer, you have an engineer, I think a navigator, a few others, and then you have generic crew markers as well. If enough generic crew markers are taken out, this can actually lower the quality of your crew and make you less experienced overall, which can cause you issues and cause further modifiers to your future die rolls. But if you keep them intact and you do better, you have successful patrols, then this crew quality can increase and can give you better modifiers for future roles. So it's kind of a cool thing. You're trying really hard to keep your crew together and keep them from being hurt. And that's, again, where the more tension comes in from the damage you've suffered. Do you cancel the patrol and go back home, or do you keep going? Ultimately, a successful patrol is determined by, did you have one ship sunk? That's all it is. Sink one ship and you have had a successful patrol, which is important when you get to the refit portion, once you get back to port. So you repeat this process through each travel box. As I said, you move into a travel box, roll for encounter. If you got an encounter, then you can see what it is. If you want, decide if you want to attack. If not, you move to the next box and keep going until you get to the last box, which is your port. And once you're there, that's when you begin the refit process. So if you've had no damage on your boat at all, then it's 1 month. So if you say went off on a patrol in September of 1939, it was successful and you sank one ship, then October would be a refit month, and then your next patrol would be in November. So that's how that works. If you have damage to a certain point, then you have to take another month, and sometimes more than that, depending on what systems are damaged. Crew can be severely wounded, as I said, and if they're important to you, then you have a chance that they might not heal in time for your next patrol, and you might have to go off with a different one. So if you have a expert named crewman, when I say named, I mean named as in role. So like an engineer, for example, who's an expert, that means they're very good at repairs. Say they get seriously wounded, and then you roll when you get back to port and they're just so badly wounded they can't continue with you in time, so you have to take on another engineer, and they're going to be just a normal engineer. They're not going to be advanced anymore. So there's little considerations like that as well. So you refit, reload your torpedoes, get your repairs, your crew parties, supposedly. There's no tables for that. No tables for debauchery or anything like that, like you might see in the movie Das Boot is what it's called. Das Boot. It's a great movie if you get a chance to watch it. It'll give you a really good insight into how U-boat crews operated back then. Great movie, classic. You determine some other things too at this stage in the game. So there's for every 3 successful patrols, there's a chance you can advance your crew quality overall or advance a certain crewman to an expert level. You can get a promotion if 12 months have gone by. If you've gone over a certain threshold and sunk tonnage, then you can get a certain award, which is the Iron Cross. There's actually several levels to this. So the Knight's Cross is just a regular award. It's actually a rather coveted one back in the day during the war. To receive that Knight's Cross, you need to sink 100,000 tons of ships. That's a lot. But you get it automatically if you sink a capital ship. So you can see sinking a capital ship is really a opportunity of a lifetime, because it's a very small chance that you're actually going to roll that as an encounter. But then rolling a really lucrative one, like, say, the Nelson, which is 35,000 tons. That's a lot of tonnage. But again, you sink it, you get a Knight's Cross when you get back. And the Knight's Cross actually gives you a little bit of a benefit in the form of a modifier in the game, or actually a mitigation of a modifier. And then there's other levels of Knight's Crosses that you can get. You can get oak leaves, then oak leaves and swords, and then finally oak leaf swords and diamonds. And each of these does certain things for you, gives you certain abilities, and they stack. So you get the first one with Knight's Cross, and then with oak leaves, you also get a favorable die roll modifier when you're firing for a night surface attack, I believe it is. So, these things stack as you go further along if you're lucky enough to get these awards. This is important. So the crew quality, your expert crew, and you getting awards, Knight's Crosses, to give you in-game benefits, are power-ups, or leveling up mechanisms, really, in the game, because this gives you a better chance to survive later down the road. If you're not scoring enough hits, if you're not sinking enough ships, you're going to be just this trained crew. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. There's 4 levels of training for your submarine crew. There's green, where your crew's just not very good at what they do. Trained is where they've gone through school, they're competent and they know what they're doing. There's veteran, which they're very good at what they do. And then there's elite, which they are the best at what they do. And again, this quality can go down if enough generic crew counters get injured, or it can go up if you have 3 successful war patrols in a row and you roll on the correct result on the table. This is important to level up, because it's like going into a dungeon, say, with a first level character, and by the time you get to the 10th level and final level and you're about to face the boss monster, you don't want to be first level anymore. You want to be advanced. You want to be able to defeat these guys. And to do that, you really need to build up your characters, build up your boat, and you can even get better U-boats. So as the game progresses, more U-boats become available. As I said, there's 8, I believe, in total. You start off choosing from one of 3, and then 5 more become, like I said, math folks, sorry, 5 more become available as the war progresses, and you can choose to upgrade to those if you want. I think there might be a process for that. I can't remember, but I think it's more or less automatic in this. I'm thinking more of Night Fighter Ace or Interceptor Ace, where you have prestige, which is something that you earn by gaining air-to-air kills in those games, that grants you the ability to move to a better aircraft when it becomes available. I don't think that's a thing in this game, though. There's no prestige, so you don't have to worry about that. And that is it, really. That's the game. You have optional rules as well included in here. You can do a 2-player game. There's actually rules for that, but that's tacked on. This is at heart a solo game. Don't get me wrong. This is completely solo, which is why I bring it to your attention. But there's a 2-player option if you want to try it. There's also tournament rules if you want to try to do that, called top tonnage tournaments. So you, I guess, are all competing against each other to see who could sink the most ships in a patrol. Then there's further optional rules as well. There's a little bit of history, and there's famous U-boat captains. There's historical notes, and there's some suggestions and hints for maybe improving your play, that kind of thing. Overall, it's a very well-rounded game. If you're interested in U-boats, if you're interested in World War II, if you're interested in submarine warfare just in general, this is a good game to pick up. And you're interested in solo wargaming too, of course, this is a really good game to pick up. Now, there's a lot of them out there that you can choose to play, and I could recommend them all day long to you. I mean, in fact, I did that. I think I talked a lot about them in the last episode, number 90, the first of 3 parts in solo wargaming. It's a rich environment to choose from, and I bring this one to the table again just because I'm familiar with it and because I've been playing it. I'll be bringing other reviews to the table that aren't necessarily war games in the future here, but this game, outstanding, does a great job. It's a lot of fun, and I enjoy it tremendously. So that said, solo strength, obviously, it's a solo game, so it's very strong. There's no getting around that. It's absolutely outstanding because that's what it was built to be, as a solo game. Replayability, or tread on the tires, I guess, is what I would call it. It's kind of, it's fantastic for this game because it's always a different game. Random rolls mean different results, and you do make meaningful choices throughout the game, which I think is important. You might disagree with the things I've said. You might think, oh, that's not meaningful. Well, that's fine. For me, it is, which is why I love it. See, I went through this stage where I loved games like that, and I think I talked about this in the last episode. Games that are on rails like that, like B-17 Queen of the Skies, or America Bomber Evil Queen of the Skies, which is another Greg Smith design, by the way, or Target for Today or Target for Tonight. These are all chart-based rolling dice fests that are narrative generators, and they're a lot of fun. There's a point where I just got where it's like, oh, this is all on rails. It's all predetermined. There's no meaningful decisions, which isn't entirely true. Well, let me rephrase that. B-17 Queen of the Skies was very much on rails. The only control you really had, meaningful choices you made, was to name your crew, which was always fun. You know, put your friends in the bomber, put them in different positions on the bomber, and play out and see who survives and who doesn't, who gets wounded, who doesn't. It's still a fun game, but you have to have the right mindset for it. You have to think, okay, this is going to be enjoyable because it's generating a narrative for me. And you still do, as I said, have those important decision points to make throughout the game. So that's why I think it's great, and I think you guys would probably love it. So, stomp of approval, as I mentioned early on, this is something that I have to really think hard about because this game seemed to be a no-brainer to bring to your attention. In that regard, I would give it a stomp of approval. Yes, I've given it a stomp of approval, and that is historical, I guess, because I've never done it before. And I mean, just the idea of bringing this to you, I thought, why did I bring this to the table? Well, because I'm familiar with it. Well, why am I doing that? Why am I familiar with it? Well, because I'm playing it. Why am I playing it? Well, because it's going to be the lead game for my other podcast. Oh my gosh, this is a great game to talk about. And this is a great game to deserve a stomp of approval. Since it's since it's published rather by GMT, and I guess promoted by them too, I don't know that they would take the stomp of approval artwork, but I certainly will reach out to them and offer it to them. So congratulations, GMT. Congratulations, Greg Smith. You have received the first stomp of approval from Michael, for what that's worth. So this wraps up episode number 91 of the Solosaurus podcast. And that brings to mind, I wonder if I need to do something amazing and special for 100. I probably won't, to be honest. Everybody makes big deals out of this, but it's just another number, right? But I'll keep it in mind. We'll see what we come up with. We're proud and thankful to be a continuing part of the Dice Tower Network, and I'm especially thankful to Eric Summerer for redoing an intro for the podcast. Appreciate that, Eric. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we will continue to be a presence on Facebook. As you probably noticed, I've been trying to keep that going or be more engaging on there. Also, even on Instagram, which I've never really used before. I have an account, but I never use it, a personal one. But Solosaurus, I've actually posted more pictures to Solosaurus in the last couple of weeks than I have in my regular account, which I probably had for like 15 years and not ever used, or however long it's been a thing. So it's solosauruspodcast@gmail.com for the email. If you want to do that, check us out at Solosaurus on Facebook. If you would love to, we'd appreciate it. Share the podcast if you'd like, get the word out. If anybody asks for a good solo gaming podcast, hopefully I would be humbly appreciative if you would recommend what we do here. I would appreciate that. And also, again, I'd appreciate it if you would go check out Game Castle with a K, and maybe take advantage of that 10% Solosaurus discount. That would be awesome. Again, it earns us a little bit of cash. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be rich doing this, but that's not why I do it. It's not for the money. This was something they offered, and I thought, well, sure. I didn't realize that was part of the package. So it's great. I mean, to get that and to move forward with maybe, mitigating some of the cost of the podcast. Because it's not just that. It's going to be the other podcast as well. I've got sound effects that I do for that I subscribe to. So, it's not huge, but, every little bit helps. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention in the last episode, the Solosaurus micro badge on BGG. If you want one, send me an email with your BGG ID. Mine is TextScripter. It's TEXSCRIPTER on BGG. You can reach out to me there too if you'd like, and I'd be glad to gift you the Geek Gold there. I want to thank BGG user Albert Hernandez, or Fractaloon, FRACTALOON, for granting me Geek Gold to continue this tradition that Martin did for granting gold for the Solosaurus micro badge. So if you need it, send me a request. Again, thank you, Albert, for that. That's awesome that you did that. That was weeks ago that you did that, I know, but I'm just now getting to thank you on the air on the podcast for that. So that's awesome. And that's it, folks. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being there. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please check out Game Castle, and I will see you in the next episode.